And a quorum is present. So I will call this meeting of the Plan Commission of June 27th, 2022 to order. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator.
All right, welcome to our Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. Communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the Plan Commission should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, we will go to public comment. I don't believe that we have any public comment. Heather, could you let me? That's right. Okay, no public comment. Moving on to minutes of the June 13th regular meeting. Are there any additions and or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. I will assume unanimous consent on approval of the minutes unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. In terms of our upcoming meetings, we have one scheduled for July 11th, July 25th, August 8th, and August 29th. These are regular meetings and they will start at 5:30. Next, we have special items of business. The first item is Plan Commission appointment to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. Heather, did you have something?
Oh, Chair Zellers, I had noticed that Commissioner Cantrell had a raised hand.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Commissioner Cantrell.
I just wanted to tell the commission that I'm going to be absent for the July 11th Plan Commission meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Is there anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything? Thank you. Then we will move on to Plan Commission appointment to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. And my understanding is that Alder Paulson is interested in that particular position. Can I get a confirmation nod from Alder Paulson if that's accurate? Okay. So we will need a motion then to appoint him as our representative to TPPB. Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, congratulations, Alder Paulson, and thank you very much for being our representative to TPPB. Next item on the agenda, still under special items of business, is agenda item 2, Legistar 58948, Planning Division update on Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan. And my understanding is that Urvashi will be kicking this off. Urvashi, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Urvashi Martin with the Planning Division, here to give an update on the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan. It's been a while since we last provided an update to the Plan Commission on this planning process. It was back in January of 2020. This planning process was paused for a couple of years for the Starkweather Creek watershed study that was being conducted in this area. And now we are restarting this planning process and here to give an update to the Commission. Also joining here with me from the project team is Colin Punt. So what we'll be covering in today's presentation, recap some of the background information of the planning area, share some of the draft plan recommendations, share some of the public feedback that we received so far from the planning process, and share the timeline for this process, what some of the next steps are, and then we'll be available for your questions. So a little bit of background about the planning area. It's on the northeast side of the city. For the boundaries, the town line between Town of Burke and Town of Sun Prairie forms the eastern boundaries of the planning area. Thorson Road forms kind of the southern boundaries of the planning area. Felland Road and the Wisconsin Southern Railroad tracks form the western and the northern boundaries of the planning area. Almost all of the lands within the planning area currently within the Town of Burke, which is expected to attach to the City of Madison by 2036 under the cooperative plan that exists between City of Madison, City of Sun Prairie, Village of DeForest, with the Town of Burke, that determines how Town of Burke will be incorporated within these municipalities when it dissolves in 2036. Area-wise, this planning area is roughly 1,480 acres. There's some existing developments within the planning area, which include some residential and some commercial and industrial uses along Reiner and Nelson Road. And this planning area falls entirely within the Sun Prairie School District. Just a little bit of context in terms of adjacent neighborhood development plans that the city has developed adjacent to this planning area. Immediately to the west is the Nelson Neighborhood Development Plan, which was updated a few years back in 2019. To the southwest is the Felland Neighborhood Development Plan that was adopted back in 2002. A portion of that planning area overlaps with the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan. We'll be looking at the recommendations for that portion and revising that as part of this planning process. And to the south is the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan that was adopted back in 2009. Our 2018 comprehensive plan, generalized future land use map, had recommended this planning area as well as the area to the east of that as a future growth area and recommends that as a neighborhood planning area. So a more detailed planning process needs to occur for this area. In this map here, we have overlaid our draft land use recommendations for the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan over the comp plan's generalized future land use map. So what we'll be focusing on with this planning effort, we will be identifying what future land uses would be appropriate for this area and the types of housing and residential developments that can occur in this area. We'll be providing recommendations on transportation and street layout that can encourage more connectivity, walkability, bikeability, and extension of future transit to serve this area. We'll also be evaluating park spaces, the existing park spaces and future park spaces to serve future residents. We'll also be identifying potential stormwater management and drainage locations, and also we'll be developing a phasing plan to show how public utilities could be extended to serve this area. and also sustainability. This plan will identify strategies and recommendations to advance sustainability as we plan for this new neighborhood. So these are our draft land use recommendations. We're using the land use categories that we typically use in our neighborhood development plans. So for housing, we are recommending housing mix 1 through 4 as the types of housing within the planning area. And we'll talk a little bit more detail what these housing mix categories will include in the next few slides. For neighborhood mixed use, we're recommending 2 locations for that within the planning area at the intersection of Reiner and Nelson Road and Future Lean Road and Thorson Road intersection. For employment use, we're recommending employment use at the southeast quadrant of Nelson and Reiner Road, and also a small portion just west of Reiner Road. There are some existing light industrial type of uses along Malley Road here, which we are seeking feedback from the Plan Commission here if we should show that area as employment or we should change that to light industrial use. This larger open space area, which is just north of Nelson Road, we are recommending that as a future regional natural and recreation area. The Dane County Parks and Open Space Plan recommends this as part of the Koshkonong Natural Resource Area Corridor. So there's several natural resources that are recommended for preservation in that plan. Also, the cooperative plan recommends this as a open space area between City of Madison and City of Sun Prairie. So we're recommending this as a future regional natural and recreation area. And some potential recreational activities could be trails for hiking, mountain biking, shoreline fishing, bird watching, winter activities like cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, etc. Also in this plan, we're recommending future park spaces. So right now there are 3 existing parks within the planning area. A portion of the Burke Town Hall is public parkland. There's also a neighborhood park right across from Thorson Road here. And Oak Ridge Park in this subdivision just north of Nelson Road. In addition to these 3 existing parks, we're recommending 3 new park locations. So park just off of Burke Road, and a second park kind of on the eastern edge of the planning area. And this third park just south of this larger recreation area, kind of like a gateway entrance to this larger open space recreation area. In addition to that, another land use category we're showing here on the map, the stormwater and other open space, which is the lighter green shades on the map. These include areas that are recommended for stormwater management as part for future developments, and also other open space areas that are not developable. So, and areas with environmental features like wetlands, floodplains, steep topography, hydric soils, etc., fall within that stormwater and other open space category. So just to describe a little bit about the different types of housing mixes, housing mix 1, it's predominantly detached single-family housing, but could have a mix of 4 units, townhomes, duplexes. Building heights for this type of housing mix ranges between 1 to 2 stories. Another feedback that we're seeking from the Plan Commission is the density range that we are recommending for the housing mix 1. Typically, in the past, neighborhood development plans have used housing mix 1, a density range of 0 to 8 dwelling units per acre with an average of 6 dwelling units per acre. We are recommending increasing that to 6 to 12 dwelling units with an average of 8 dwelling units per acre. Housing mix 2 is also single family, but slightly more intensive. Single family on smaller lots, the mix of 4 units, townhomes, duplexes, also smaller multifamily buildings. Building heights range between 1 to 3 stories, and the average density is roughly 15 dwelling units per acre. Housing mix 3 consists of townhomes, duplexes, 4 units, and smaller multifamily buildings with the building heights of 2 to 4 stories with the average density of 30 dwelling units per acre. Housing mix 4, which is the most intensive type of housing we're recommending within the planning area, consists of multifamily apartment buildings up to 5 stories in height with an average density of 40 dwelling units per acre. Neighborhood mixed use consists of multifamily residential above commercial uses. Building heights range between 2 to 4 stories, and the average density is similar to housing mix 4 of 40 dwelling units per acre. Another recommendation we have in the plan is for long-term agriculture, which we're showing on the map here with the hash red mark on the map to show these long-term agricultural areas. These are generally areas where there's some existing agricultural use and also some environmental features, which might make these areas slightly less competitive for future development. So we feel that maybe these areas could be shown for long-term agriculture. If these areas want to develop as shown in our future land use map, they could, but if they want to remain as long-term agriculture or be considered for urban agriculture and other concepts like that, these areas provide that flexibility. And that's a feedback that we're seeking from the Plan Commission on these 2 areas that we're showing for long-term agriculture. These are our draft transportation recommendations. So this is the street network that we're recommending in the plan. Reiner Road is the north-south arterial street that runs through the planning area and continues further north. Future Lean Road was recommended in the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan, which is just south of the planning area as a arterial street. We're recommending extending that further to connect further east as an arterial street. Nelson Road functions as an arterial street until Reiner Road, and then transitions to a collector street as we move further to the east. Burke Road is the east-west collector street within the planning area. And Thorson Road, existing Thorson Road, extends up till Burke Road. We are recommending extending that further north to connect with Nelson Road as a collector street. In addition to that, we are recommending a detailed local street network that can really encourage connectivity within the planning area. Also in the plan, we are providing detailed recommendations on the future planned street cross sections for arterial and collector streets. We have detailed sketches in the plan documents to illustrate what the recommended right-of-way should be, what type of bicycle facility and on-street parking, terrace widths, etc., should be for these planned street cross sections. For Reiner Road, future Lean Road, and Nelson Road, which are likely going to carry higher traffic volumes, we are recommending a shared use path as the type of to accommodate pedestrian and bicycle travel on those streets by creating a safe accommodation for pedestrians and bicyclists by separating them from the traffic. Burke and Thorson Road, which are the collector streets, we're recommending a buffered bike lane as the preferred on-street bicycle facility for those streets. There's segments of Reiner Road and Future Lean Road and Burke Road that are adjacent to areas we are recommending for higher density housing and mixed-use developments. We are recommending that those segments should be considered for on-street parking. For our bike and shared use path network, so as I mentioned in the previous slide, Reiner Road, Nelson Road, and Future Lean Road, we're recommending shared use path for those streets that are likely going to carry higher traffic volumes. In addition to that, we're recommending 5 off-street shared use path network within the planning area. So a couple of shared use paths that were recommended in the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan, just south of the planning area. We're extending them. So the town center path, we are recommending extending that to the north, and then recommending a railroad crossing to connect that path to the neighborhoods to the west of the planning area. There's a north-south pipeline that goes through the planning area, and the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan had recommended the north pipeline path to run parallel to that pipeline. We're recommending extending that through the planning area and then connecting it to the shared use path for Reiner Road, and then extending further north to connect with the larger regional trail network. There's also east-west greenway path that we're recommending through the planning area that runs through some of the greenways we are recommending in the planning area. And then there's this east-west path, which kind of forms just the southern boundaries of the planning area, which was recommended in the Northeast Neighborhood Development Plan. We're continuing that recommendation in this plan. And then we're recommending a railroad path to run parallel or adjacent to the Wisconsin Southern Railroad tracks, and then a railroad crossing up to the north here to connect that path to the neighborhoods to the north of the planning area in Sun Prairie. For our draft sustainability recommendations, some highlights from our sustainability strategies and recommendation. Generally for land use and transportation, we're trying to plan for land uses that are more facilitate more compact growth, and also use some of the complete Green Street principles to allow more trips that could be made by walking, biking, or by transit in this neighborhood. Also improve stormwater management by integrating features such as rain barrels, green roofs, blue roofs, etc. Also integrating renewable energy in the building design through the use of things like rooftop solar panels, making sure developments are solar ready. Also improve stormwater management and infiltration through the use of features like rain gardens, porous pavements, terrace plantings, etc. Increasing the tree canopy in the neighborhood and making sure new developments are electric vehicle ready. So we've had 2 public meetings so far in the planning process. The first public meeting was held in November of 2019, prior to the planning process being paused. We had our second public meeting, a virtual and an in-person public meeting on June 6th. Some of the feedback that we received from those meetings, support for pet bike facilities. There were some concerns brought up about losing the rural feel and the desire to preserve some of the open spaces. There were some questions that residents asked about how utilities would be extended to serve this area, what will happen to the quarries when they come in to the city, if this plan would result any changes to the school district boundaries, also concerns about disruption to current residents when construction starts, any plans for improvements to Reiner Road, intersection improvements for Reiner Nelson Road, and also there were several questions relating to the cooperative plan. So the timeline that we are looking at for this planning process, we are here before you tonight to give you an update. We'll also be providing an update to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board at their July 18th meeting. For the rest of July, staff will work on revising and completing the full draft of the plan text and the maps, and then hoping to introduce the draft plan to the council to go through the board's commission review process in the month of August, and then going to the council for their consideration of adoption in their September meeting. So that concludes my presentation. These are the 3 questions that staff is looking for feedback from the Plan Commission, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Urvashi. First, I would like to ask if there are any questions of staff. Why don't we take down the screen share for a little bit, and we can bring it back up as we need it. Are there any questions of staff? Alder Heck.
Thank you. Urvashi, thanks for the presentation. That was great. I just have a question about the public input component. You had the slide that sort of summarized some of, must have been the most frequently mentioned comments that you got from the public. When and how do you anticipate those will be addressed? I mean, some of those are kind of complex issues, about MSD, about school districts and all sorts of things. How will those continue to be discussed as this works towards a final draft, or how will those sort of things continue to be discussed?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we tried to address some of those questions and concerns as they came up at the public meeting. So, for example, the school district, if there's going to be any changes to the school district with this planning process, it will not. The school district determines their school boundaries. This planning process is not going to impact that. We are in conversation with the Sun Prairie School District for their needs for a future school site within the planning area. Based on our estimated number of dwelling units that we are recommending in this plan, the school district has indicated that there might be a need for a future elementary school. So we are in conversation with the school district in trying to figure out the location for a future school site. In terms of other concerns that have come up, there were several questions relating to the cooperative plan, which has been in place since 2007 when that was adopted. So we have tried to address some of those questions. We are also having several one-on-one meetings with major property owners in this area. So a lot of the property owners would also ask us on our draft recommendations from the plan. So we're trying to explain them the reasoning for our recommendations and trying to address some of those concerns. We are also trying to have other stakeholder meetings. So we've tried to reach out to the town of Burke and also City of Sun Prairie and school district and other stakeholders who might want to talk to staff and provide feedback. So we're trying to make those, trying to have those meetings to get some of those feedback and address some of those concerns that came up.
Great, that was helpful. I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, my question is, I noticed that the off-road shared use paths are running through the long-term ag areas, both the gas pipeline and the other one that you showed. I know these are long-term plans, but and I'm in favor of both the off-road bike and shared paths and the long-term ag, but there seems to be some conflict there. So anyway, maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, so the long-term agricultural locations that we're showing, they're conceptual. We've tried to draw out the area that seem to be fit within some of those criteria that we were thinking of, like if they have existing agricultural uses, or if they have certain environmental features which might make them undevelopable, and so they might have be a little more less competitive in terms of future development potential. So these are conceptual locations. Also, the paths that we are recommending, the shared use paths, are also conceptual locations. So at the time of construction, they'll likely be more refined and adjusted. So hopefully they would not conflict, and there'll be a little more flexibility. So that's how we are trying to show this. Again, they'll be refined further as time of construction or other considerations.
Okay. Thank you for your explanation. Thank you. That's all I have now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepard.
Hi. Actually, I'm going to follow up on something that Commissioner Cantrell mentioned as it relates to the long-term agriculture sites. What are the benefits of those sites? And I guess two questions here. One, what are the benefits of those sites? And two, could you talk a little bit about in the future if additional growth or additional residential housing of some type is needed, how difficult would it be possible to change those sites, and how difficult would it be so that they could accommodate, some form of housing?
Yeah, so the way we are showing these long-term agriculture is that these are overlay locations. So there is that flexibility that if these areas would like to develop as recommended in our future land use plan, they could, but they also have that flexibility that if these areas want to remain as long-term agriculture, they could, or they could be considered as future sites for things like urban agriculture. We have had several feedback from the mayor and others, also from the public, if there are certain areas that could be considered for future for agriculture as we're planning for this area. So we wanted to have that flexibility in this plan by showing some of these overlay locations.
Okay, so this is something that actually the community that they've asked for.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Is that all, Commissioner Shepard? Okay, great. Thank you. Alder Paulson.
Hi. Kind of continuing on with the long-term ag theme here. I actually have two questions, one long-term ag and one completely unrelated. So I'll start with the long-term ag one. Setting aside Voigt Farm, which is kind of a weird case, are there other places in our recent planning where we have put out sort of a long-term ag overlay?
I'm not aware of. Maybe Colin or Heather might have some examples if they have been.
I could jump in on that one. So we don't have large areas where we've identified the possibility for long-term agriculture at this point. Now, a major exception to that is widespread support for smaller scale urban agriculture, sort of woven into other development opportunities. I think that the city, we made a lot of effort during the rewrite of the zoning code about a decade ago to make sure urban agriculture was widely allowable in all sorts of zoning districts. But with regard to larger scale, 40-acre or more agricultural areas, we don't have those identified at this point. Now, part of the reason is it's really tough in a growing city where the goals are compact growth, fiscally responsible growth, not sort of creating missing teeth in our urban systems. It's hard to find those places that would make a lot of sense for long-term agriculture. It's a challenge that I think we're giving a little bit more thought to, given some of the work from our city's Food Policy Council and subcommittees in that group. I think that in this particular case, there might be some opportunities for long-term agriculture that don't preclude urban development around them. And so that's what we've really tried to find. It's not easy. And I think moving forward, we can continue to look for opportunities on our city's periphery that not only may be best to simply note as future open space, but make that a little bit broader, future open space or long-term agriculture. Again, those opportunities aren't appropriate widely based on how the city should grow in a responsible manner. But as Urvashi mentioned, in places like these that have been identified in this process, which may not be a good fit for development in the long term, we think that this use could fit in well in the longer term. So we're trying to take care and provide, identify areas that could be a good fit for long-term ag without jeopardizing, compact, responsible urban growth.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Did you have any further questions?
Yes, I have a completely different topic.
Okay, very
question.
good. Go ahead.
I know that this is a sort of a long way off, 2030, 2040, actual changes in the ground and things happening. But have we given any thought in these sort of really long-term plans for how to sort of incorporate some of Metro in thinking about where Metro might go or how that might work? I know that especially on the west side where we, have grown, we keep growing west and west and west, and Metro stops, pretty. The city goes several miles past where Metro stops out there, and I'm just wondering if we can start to kind of think about what would the future look like for Metro and where might it go and how could we incorporate them into these sorts of plans, even if we're not holding to them. And the nice thing about the bus is you can reroute it, and the problem with the bus is that you can reroute it for planning purposes. So I'm just curious what we can do about thinking about what would mass transit look like on these plans.
Urvashi, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so right now, Route 23 serves the Sun Prairie Park and Ride lot, which is just north of the planning area. Future Bus Rapid Transit is expected to serve that park and ride as well. We have talked to Metro Transit staff, and they've indicated that Reiner Road is likely going to be a future transit corridor, and also likely extend a portion of Nelson Road and Burke Road, and also Lean Road. So we are showing that in our future transit map plan recommendations. That's what we have kind of heard from Metro as this area starts to grow and see more development. The transit routes are likely going to be extended as development starts to occur. And right now, what we are hearing is for Reiner and portions of Nelson and Burke Road, and that's what we have shown in our maps.
Thank you, Urvashi. I see that Colin has something to add. Colin?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add two quick things. One is that Metro usually follows the development, and so while they have identified the routes that they would potentially put a bus route on, they won't do so until there's development that can support it. And then the other thing is, and this is a refrain that those of us in development review hear along a lot, is that they are very constrained in their funding. And as we continue to build development on the periphery, Metro has issues with extending service further and further because their funding is so constrained. So those are two of the items that kind of prevent us from having a really good idea of where exactly that routing is going to be. But I think it's the information that Urvashi gave you is kind of very good for what we and Metro know right now.
Thank you, Colin.
Okay.
Did you have any follow-up, Alder Paulson?
No, I'll just say that I apologize if you actually had it right on the slide there to say, hey, this is a Metro route. I was looking at some of the lake paths and other paths there. And so if that was right on the slide, I missed it. I apologize. But thank you for your explanation. That did cover what I was asking. So.
It's in the maps thing that's attached to Legistar. I'm not sure if it was in the slides, but anyway, you can find it out there.
Yeah, it wasn't in the slide presentation, but it's included in the draft plan maps.
Okay, thank you. So, Commissioner Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a question relating to parking and transportation along the roads. So rather than looking at doing on-street parking, I saw some pictures of like the protected bike lanes and stuff like that. What's the thought of continuing that instead of the on-street parking throughout the development area? Utilizing some off-street parking, kind of like our TLD discussion that's been going on, is getting cars off of the streets more and making it more open and pedestrian friendly. Was that considered, or is that something still in the works?
With our street cross sections where we are showing the shared use path, usually for Reiner, Nelson, and future Lean Road that are likely going to carry higher traffic volumes, the shared use path will kind of be that protected facility, so kind of function as a protected bike lane because it will be separated from the traffic. So it kind of functions as a safer accommodation for pedestrians and bicyclists by separating them from the traffic. So that's how we've tried to accommodate that in the higher volume streets. For collector streets that we are showing in the planning area, we're showing a buffered bike lane. So there's a 3-foot buffer between the traffic and the bicycle lane to provide that protection.
Right. I recall that. I'm just saying about, you had 3 streets, I think, that you had on-street parking associated with it. Those streets are the ones I was thinking of, is why not have those not have parking as well?
The reason why we're showing on-street parking there is just the additional developments that we are showing. We want to make sure that with the higher density there, we want to slow traffic down by having that on-street parking lane be there. And also, it also serves as an additional level of separation from vehicular traffic by having that on-street parking. So that's why we're showing that on-street parking on those segments that are adjacent to these higher density housing or mixed use areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mendez. I had the same question, so thank you for posing that. I don't see any raised hands. I wanted to just make I have one question. I was glad to see the geothermal encouragement, and I'm wondering how you intend to encourage geothermal, because I agree with that. I think we need to do something along those lines. Colin.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So the staff working on the plan were directed by the mayor to take a deeper look at sustainability recommendations than some of our other NDPs do, and there are a number of things that we as a city can require, and there are a number of things that we cannot. Probably a larger number of things that we cannot require. For geothermal, that's not something that I think we can require to happen, but we are exploring ways to do a kind of a smaller district and use heating under public property, parks or other public facilities, and then allow other users to tap into that. So that becomes less of a requirement and more of a it's a carrot and not a stick. So I think at this point that's the method that we would go forward with right now. But those items that we're not we can't require. We tried to identify the things that would be most impactful, and we thought that would be a very impactful method for this area.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Okay, seeing no raised hands. Staff have questions that they would like the input of plan commissioners. And obviously, if you have other comments beyond what we're being specifically asked, you're very welcome to provide that input too. Let's go to the questions, and then if there's any other input. So the first one is about increasing housing mix 2 in terms of the number of dwelling units per acre in housing mix 2. Housing mix 1. What input do plan commissioners have in regard to that? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I would support upping that density as staff mentions. It doesn't preclude lower densities, but it does open up some possibilities for a little more intense housing options. So I think that's a positive.
Okay. Thank you, Alder. Can people indicate? Oh, okay. Alder Paulson.
I was also going to say that I would support that, upping that density, and I think it actually ties in nicely with maybe some of the geothermal things. I think you might be able to find some developer who says, we want to specifically target, a sustainable or green or something facilities. There's a couple of developments that have happened kind of around that theme, and density is key to that. But there may be some of this other infrastructure thing. I think that if we can let's not have any sort of numbers or limitations in the way to make some of that happen.
Thank you, Alder. Okay, can I see thumbs up if people are in general agreement? Okay, it looks like that it's support. Thank you. Then the second question, staff is proposing employment use for the southeast quadrant of Nelson and Reiner Road. This has several light industrial type uses along Malley Road. Staff has received feedback from the Economic Development Division staff that these businesses are likely going to continue and might be replaced with similar businesses that are not going to be office type employment uses. Should staff change this area along Malley Road from employment to light industrial uses? Input, thoughts about that question. Commissioner Cantrell.
I would generally support that. I think that the uses that are there, a heating business, mini storage, those sorts of businesses, I would kind of expect to see some of those there. Maybe in 40 years when they're redeveloped at least on the intersections, we may see, more refined development with employment or offices, but I don't think that's going to happen for a long time. So
thank you, Commissioner.
Staff.
Any other input on this one? Are commissioners in agreement with Commissioner Cantrell and with the industrial type use? Again, can you? Okay, so I'm seeing some thumbs up and some, so I guess the general leaning is toward going with the industrial and leaving it that way. If anybody feels strongly the other way, let me know. No, okay. Question number 3, the agriculture, the long-term agriculture identification. Input on that. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yeah, I'm generally supportive of that. The one site that's identified has many parcels, very long parcels. And when I think of agriculture, I think of, 80 acres, 100 acres, and cornfields and soybeans and that sort of thing. But there's another urban type of agriculture that are small, plots that people grow for farmers markets and that sort of thing. So I guess if that's some of the concepts that we're looking at, the long parcelization on the southern part may work. And obviously it's going to be very difficult to put streets through there because you're going to have to get 12 people to agree on a street extension, which will likely never happen, or at least be a long term deciding that. So, but maybe staff can kind of give it a little bit more explanation of kind of their thinking of long-term ag in that area. But my other caveat is that I'm assuming the city is going to be growing further east. It looks like that will be a future planning area. And obviously there's large parcels within that area, which will likely be in ag use for a long time. So I guess that's another question, but maybe Heather can answer the question I raised.
Heather?
I'll lean on Urvashi and Colin to talk a little bit about the selection of the area that you described with the long parcels on the map. But I do think, I want to stress, kind of underscore something Urvashi said before. I don't think that staff is proposing that this area be solely recommended for only long-term agriculture, but rather identified as an area that could make sense for a mid to longer term use. It could still develop, but it's not an area that is as well suited for development as others around it. And so it's not going to, if it stays in ag, it's not going to preclude responsible expansion of urban infrastructure, et cetera. But I want to stop there and look at Colin and Urvashi to fill in some of the gaps there.
Which one of you would like to take that? Colin, go ahead.
I will start, and I'm sure Urvashi might have something to add, but just regarding the question about the selection of those areas, the individual long parcels are already set up to have a situation where a coherent development is going to be difficult there because you have a number of different landowners. It's, getting roads through there is going to be difficult. Mm-hmm. So that in itself kind of lends it toward doing something like the urban agriculture. The more northeasterly section is probably a little bit better for development, but it is also on the other side of the ridgeline that runs through the planning area. The utilities, specifically sewer, will be extended there last of everything. So that's going to be a pretty long-term decision when that comes around. So at that point, we'll probably have one or two new planning rounds through this area. I'm sure we'll have a better idea of what's going on there.
Urvashi, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll say that I agree with what Colin said, that it's just very difficult to show streets through some of those parcels. It's just, and there's also intermittent stream there and also wetlands. So that would, in general, be shown as a stormwater and others open space. So that area in general, compared to the other areas that have more development potential, it's probably not kind of on the higher priority list, and that's why we ended up selecting some of these areas. And like Colin said, the the northeasterly portion being in the kind of the phase 2 area of the plan, where utilities are going to be not going to be extended for a while. That also kind of plays into that. And there are also some protected areas that fall within that area where that would stay in the town until 2036. So that will probably develop way later. So those were some considerations.
Thank you, Urvashi. Did you have
Okay.
any follow-ups, Commissioner?
No, that was very complete. Thank you very much.
And so your thoughts then on the question?
Yeah, I would be supportive of identifying those two areas as long-term ag.
Okay. Alder Paulson, did you have something? I saw your hand raised and then I think it went down. Did you have anything you wanted to add? No. Anything else from anyone else on this question? Are people generally supportive of identifying these as long-term potential urban ag? Okay. Yes. Okay. The answer seems to be supportive. Okay. Do commissioners have anything else that they want to provide input on in regard to this plan, other than the specific questions that were asked? Anything else? Okay, seeing none. Did we need a motion or anything on anything, or it's just the indication? I assume we don't need to have any kind of motion. Okay, very good. Moving on then to the consent agenda. We do have several items for the consent agenda. Items that have been identified are based upon staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed on it by various city departments, and the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the items. So those items will be heard before other items on our agenda. And I will read the agenda item number. If any commissioners want to request separation, they can do so. So agenda item 3, 4, and then for referral, agenda items 5, 6, and 7, and that would be referral to July 25th, 2022. Agenda item 10, and then agenda items 11, for referral with no specified date. Agenda item 12, referral to July 11th at the request of the applicant. And then agenda item 14 for consent. Do any commissioners want to separate any of those items? Seeing no raised hands, I will read those then into the record. So for referral, agenda item 3, Legistar 72106, approving the amendment to the project plan and boundary for tax incremental district 45, Capitol Square West, City of Madison. Agenda item 4, Legistar 72107, approving the creation of the project plan and boundary for tax incremental district 50, State and Lake, City of Madison. And then again for referral, agenda item 5, Legistar 71244 for referral. Agenda item 6, Legistar 71245 for referral. Agenda item 7, Legistar 71249. And then on the consent agenda, agenda item 10, Legistar 247, located at 4301 East Town Boulevard, 17th Alder District. Consideration of an alteration to an approved conditional use in the Commercial Center District for a restaurant vehicle access sales and service window, and consideration of an alteration to a conditional use plan multi-use site to allow the addition of a second service lane. And then for referral, agenda item 11, for referral, agenda item 12. And then on the consent agenda, agenda item 14, Legistar 71941, reapproving the revised preliminary plat and final plat of the American Center East Park 4th Edition on property addressed as 4846 through 4902 East Park Boulevard, 17th Alder District, and granting a waiver or variance to one or more design requirements in section 16.23 paren 8 of the subdivision regulations as allowed by section 16.23 paren 10. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda? Commissioner Cantrell has moved the consent agenda. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepard. Commissioner Cantrell, did you have any comments? No.
No.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand to object, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Next, we have agenda items 8 and 9, which are related and will be considered as one public hearing. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission shall make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. I believe that Colin Punt will be giving us an overview. Colin?
Thank you, Chair Zellers. So for this item, the applicant is seeking approval of conditional uses to construct 463 apartments in 3 4-story buildings currently undeveloped 14.5-acre site located near East Town Mall. It's immediately west of the interstate and north of the Wisconsin and Southern Railroad. The 3 buildings I alluded to are labeled as 4 buildings on the plan. 2 of them are connected through a central 1-story community space. The comprehensive plan recommends general commercial for this site, while the recently adopted Greater Easttown area plan changes that land use recommendation to medium residential. Staff has noted several comments regarding conditional use approval standards 5 and 9, mostly concerning the site layout. However, I will note that the proposal has been reviewed by the UDC as a residential building complex, and that the UDC has recommended approval with several comments and conditions, which are identified in the staff report and included in the list of recommended conditions of approval. On balance, given the plan recommendation, staff does believe that the Plan Commission can find the standards of approval met, and further recommends that it forward the associated CSM to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval. And I will be available after the public hearing to answer any questions.
Thank you, Colin. And we do have a registrant. I will open the public hearing. Brian Munson, East Lakeside Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing Forward Management. Brian, you have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about the project. Here again on behalf of Forward Management, the applicant for the project. And as Colin said, this project really arose out of the discussions of the newly adopted Greater Easttown Neighborhood Plan. So just to give a little point in context, you can see here, as Colin described, the location that is bounded by Easttown to the north, the interstate to the east, a railroad track to the south, and then an open space corridor associated with Starkweather Creek to our southwest. Next slide, please. When we looked at the neighborhood plan, a couple of things stood out. One was some of the inherent challenges of this site in terms of only having frontage out to East Springs Drive. That led us to create an internal street circulation system, a private drive system with 2 access points on East Springs Drive that then circulates around the site. The next slide, please, shows the sidewalk connections, and that's another important component. We really wanted to try to integrate as many first floor walk-up entrances as possible. And as you can see, all of the units on the first floor, almost all of them, have individual entrances and ability to access the open space and neighborhood and sidewalk system that's around us. Next slide, please. The final piece being the bike system. And so we are looking to create an opportunity for the extension of the bike path. It's called for in the neighborhood plan along the open space corridor, both to the west and to the south. Next slide, please. Again, as I mentioned, as Colin also mentioned, this site is identified for mixed medium density residential. Next slide. Zooming a little bit closer, you can see the relationship of the uses and how this transitions and integrates opportunities for new housing. And that's really an exciting component of this project. Next slide, please. The other component is how it opens up to the open space, both to the west, but then creates sheltered open space on the interior of the site. Next slide, please. You can see here how the corridor that's permanent open space is owned by the City of Madison extends into the site and the amenity space. Next slide. And then extends to the south into the secondary open space within the project. Next slide. The final slide here, before we jump to the architecture, reflects some of the discussions with urban design, because we did work closely with them in multiple presentations to work through some of their concerns about the site. And as mentioned, they did receive approval at the last meeting, a recommendation of approval, because of some of the changes we had done to create multiple expressions of the street as it moves through the site, but also to interrupt it and give opportunities for traffic calming and routing. The creation of a full loop road through the site with 2 access points out in East Springs helps distribute the traffic, but also creates opportunities to deliver fire access. And those 2 pieces, coupled up with the building configurations, are what create the sheltered open space. As discussed with UDC, the interstate is higher than this site. And so the buildings themselves become the shelter from the noise and really help create a sense of enclosure around that central open space and creates the overall project, which both opens to the west, but then creates a sheltered internal location. Next slide. Again, just some of the details of that. And again, as we talked, we went through several discussions with UDC to get to their recommendation for approval. Next slide. In terms of the architecture, it's been very closely discussed with UDC, and we're confident that the discussion will result in great architecture for the site, both differentiated with materials and colors, as well articulated as you move around the project to break it into multiple expressions of buildings. Again, building from the ground up with individual entrances, outdoor porches, and patio spaces in support of the overall project. Next slide. And here you can see how with color, we have differentiated between the 2 buildings with multiple color expressions. And one of the comments UDC had in terms of the colors, we'll work closely with staff. Again, we're here tonight seeking approval with a recommendation of approval from the Urban Design Commission, a letter of support from the Alder, and staff support. And we're confident this will be a great addition and really excited to be the first piece moving the greater East Town neighborhood plan into fruition. And so I would note we have the architect, Julian Kissoff, Dan Day from Knopfler Kotke, as well as Matt Salisbury, the landscape architect, and the client, Dan Schmidt, available to answer questions. Thank you.
Oops, sorry about that. Thank you, Brian. We also have registered Julian Kissoff, Presidential Lane, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions, representing Signature Point Apartments, LLC. Also registered Matt Salisbury, Westward Way, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Representing D'Onofrio and Associates, Dan Day, Westward Way, support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. representing Forward Management. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Cantrell.
I have a question for Brian. I noticed that in one of the conditions in what you showed on the on your slide, the bike trail connection from, I guess, I forget, is it Lean Road to the southern edge of the property on the west side. Was there also another, excuse me, trail extension from that point to the interstate? And if so, are you providing any type of easement for that?
Yeah, so to talk, thank you. So the path would come along the western edge of the project down to the frontage with the railroad. Thank you, Colin. That's the perfect exhibit. Immediately south of the site, there's a drainage way and some grade transitions. But as you go across that, before you get to the railroad tracks, you're still within the right of the City of Madison drainage parcel there. And you have to actually transition up in grade to get to the interstate where it crosses underneath. So the grade of the railroad underneath the interstate is slightly higher. So we need that space to ramp up. Having said that, we've reached out to Sean Malloy and Chris Petakowski in engineering and traffic engineering to talk about routing for that. But we do feel that because that grade transition, it's difficult if it stays at along the southern border of our site, because then it would have a smaller area to go up that grade. Again, to transition that grade, we need about 400 feet to keep it about a 5% slope to get from the elevation of the site to the elevation of the railroad where it crosses under the interstate. So we're reaching out to staff and to see how we can arrange that and are open to that discussion happening.
Okay, so but the city owns the area to the south, that drainage area?
Yes, between the drainage area and the railroad right-of-way, there is a city parcel.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is perhaps for Brian. Brian, I saw in the staff report that the Greater Easttown Plan recommended that development stay, I think, 200 feet from Starkweather Creek, or maybe it was 200 feet total, 100 on each side. But it looked like in a couple of places the buildings were inside of that limit. And I wondered if you had any comment on that.
Sure. Colin, if you could pull up slide 1, I think that's probably the easiest point to illustrate. So if you go from the creek itself to the east, to the building there, it's between 175 and 200 feet because there's a little bit of meander. So most of the building around 200, a portion of it is 175. But what the discussion about that overall corridor is potentially looking for stormwater management needs. And so when we look to the southwest of the site, there are significant or likely there DNR indicated wetlands. Apologize, there's a car in the background if you're hearing that. There are DNR wetlands and floodplain on the property to the southwest of the existing city corridor, which will have more than about 1,000 feet to the west before you get out of those constraints to the southwest. So all in all, there will be a significant open space. But again, as I mentioned, and as staff has requested, we're about between 175 and 200 foot setback to the buildings.
I thought I read a much shorter distance at one point, but I'll look at that. I do appreciate the explanation. I guess while I have you, maybe a totally different question. We review a lot of different types of large housing projects, and here's one with a tremendous number of parking spaces. And from what I'm sometimes accustomed to, I see the ratio is 1.06 per bedroom or 1.56 per unit. in your experience with these types of developments? Can you compare that to similar numbers?
Sure. Yeah, right now the proposal is around 1.5 per unit, and it's a mixture of surface stalls and underground stalls. Typical market conditions for apartment projects in this area. So if you look on the map here, just looking to the southeast to the village of Autumn Lake, which is a project I worked on as well, that comes in about 1.75 stalls per thousand. Sorry, stalls per unit. So it is less than the number of parking stalls, but it also balances the fact that we've got a great street network to tap into here. The BRT is at the end of East Springs Drive. While it is a bit of a walk, it is still nearby, and hopefully the bike network will help support some of that. But in general, on the periphery, we see about 1.75 is a more typical ratio. So this is a slight reduction, but again, has to exist in the context of the surrounding competition as well.
Yeah, thanks. I agree that the potential for bike usage, especially as the network develops, could be quite strong. So I do forget too. I have to admit that it is 463 apartments, which is quite large also. So it's interesting to hear though that if the parking ratio is less than some other analogous projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Are there further questions? I have a question. I think this is for Brian also. I wasn't clear on the plans about trash, recycling, delivery, moving vans. Could you show how those are going to be accommodated?
If you could pull up, Colin, slide 10 of the presentation. So for the trash and recycling receptacles would be located near the underground parking entrances of the buildings. So if you see between buildings B and C, for example, where the entrance there to the comes in, on either side there of that is where the storage of those bins would be. As far as move in, move out, typically what we're seeing is a staggered move in, move out, with the parking stalls with the surface parking stalls serving as loading areas, and mostly coming in vehicles, not so much in full on moving vans and trucks and things like that.
And so you'll have trash and recycling outside on either side next to building B and C. Is that what you're saying?
So I can pull up a plan here and that if it's in this set or in a different one. Let me see. Apologize. We'll see if we have that in this presentation set or not.
And so residents from building D would need to take their trash and recycling over between building B and C? Am I following?
Actually, Julian, if you could, I'm not seeing a plan set here. If you could answer that question, that would be appreciated.
Could you please unmute Julian?
Yes, I did. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good evening to everybody. The trash enclosures are included in the floor plans. You can see clearly if you look at the underground parking plans. The trash enclosures are inside the buildings. And there is only one door there that when it gets serviced, then the bins are moved. Otherwise, they are not visible from anywhere. And they are on the level of the underground parking entrance.
Are you bringing up something, Colin, that's going to show that?
Yes, I am waiting for it to load. I'm scrolling right now.
Colin, if you pull up page 26 of the submittal, that's building A. You can see the underground parking plan that shows how those are located.
Colin, zoom into the left corner at the bottom. Okay, you can see there is a main door that connects inside to the tenants, and the overhead door that goes outside. No, not there. Low at the trash enclosure, if you can point. Yeah, main door, and to the left is the overhead door.
And so then those would be wheeled out to be picked up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's how they're serviced.
Yes.
Okay.
They don't stay outside, right?
Right. Okay. And so there's one location for trash and
for each
one building, one location.
one
So there'll be
per building, you're saying?
Per building, yeah.
correct.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you. And then you're saying that you don't expect moving vans
Moving vans.
to bring people's furniture to the apartments?
Well, how that works, maybe Dan Schmidt can explain, but we've done many complexes and buildings like this. And yeah, they find a way to move in and out.
Okay. So it would be, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, and again, that's also where that circulation going all the way around the project opens up opportunities. You know, as we look at the way the site is designed, if you're going to, you know, if we could pull up page 10 of the presentation packet, that's the easiest map to illustrate this. If you're going to the building B and building C, you largely use the eastern entrance off of East Springs Drive. Whereas AD, their parking facilities would be entered off the western entrance. So it helps distribute some of that and avoid any pinch points so we can, if we do have folks that are coming with a U-Haul, for example, or something of that scale, they can then move to their building and enter into the lobby and elevators if they're going upstairs, or the individual entrances if they're on the first floor.
Okay. Are there further questions of registrants? Alder Curry.
Thank you, Chair. Not sure if this matters much, but to me, when I was looking at the breakdown of the composition of apartments from studios to 3 bedrooms, I'm just curious on why there's so few 3-bedroom units in comparison to all the other offerings.
Predominantly, it's a reflection of the market out here. I think when we look at other comparable projects on the east side or on the west side, the 3 bedrooms they're few and far between. But we did want to include some to offer diversity of housing within the project and just broaden the market appeal for residents and choices. But what we see mostly in the market out here is that mix of studios 1s and 2s.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Alder? Thank you. Commissioner Shepard.
Hi, just a quick question about the follow-up on once again the question about the units. Do you have any units that are handicap, not just accessible in terms of getting in, but handicap once again sort of configured with lower counters and that sort? I'm just curious.
Julian, could you speak to the unit types?
Yes, it's a code requirement, 2% of the units to be handicapped. So we provide handicapped units per the code, as well as accessible parking stalls, surface and underground.
Okay, so you're at the 2% at the minimum.
Yes, yeah, just follow the code. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions before I close the public hearing? Seeing no raised hands, I'll close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Are there questions of staff? Seeing none, do we have a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'll move that the Plan Commission find that the standards of approval are met and approve the conditional uses to construct the 3 4-story apartment buildings at 2101 to 2115 East Springs Drive, and then also forward the CSM creating the one lot.
We'll be looking for a second motion on the CSM.
Okay.
Okay. So is there a second on the motion? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cantrell?
I think this project is consistent with our plan for the Easttown area, and it's providing, again, apartments where we need them. That has services within the area and near public transit. So that's why I'm recommending it be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further input, comments in regard to the motion? Seeing none, we'll come to vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. And then we will need a motion on the certified survey map. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I will recommend that the Plan Commission forward the certified survey map, the one lot, to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So then we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is agenda item 13, Legistar 71633, located at 131 West Wilson Street, 4th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a 12-story commercial office building. And Colin, did you have some overview for us?
Yes, thank you again. So before the commission now is the demolition of the building at 131 West Wilson Street. At this time, there's no future use proposed by the applicant for the site. The Building Inspection Division has been involved with this building for some time. Building Inspection Division Director Matt Tucker is available to answer questions regarding the building's condition. BI staff believe that given the state of the building, the structure has reached the end of its useful lifespan and should be demolished. I'll briefly emphasize that the Plan Commission's role is to review the requested demolition against the applicable standards, which staff believes can be found met. While there may be unresolved issues related to lease terms between landlords and tenants, these are private matters between those parties and are not part of the Plan Commission's jurisdiction. Again, both I and Matt will be available to answer questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Colin. We do have registrants. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Tom Gernetsky, Pleasant Oak Drive, Oregon. Support, wishing to speak. Tom, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Tom Gronetsky. I'm with Building Envelope Professionals Group in Oregon, Wisconsin. We were retained to conduct a overall assessment of 131 West Wilson as far as general condition. We were focusing on areas that might be a potential concern to public safety. There's been a fair amount of documentation as far as the condition of the parking structure. But in addition to the parking structure, we also focused on cladding and other elements on the building that, if there were a failure, could cause potential hazard to the public. We are concerned about the condition of the existing brick masonry cladding. This building is unique in that when it was originally designed and constructed, the existing masonry cladding was built and assembled in prefabricated panels. So unlike traditional construction, there's no backup wall to attach or secure the masonry to. Literally, the panels were assembled off-site, lifted into place, and welded to the floor slabs at the top and bottoms of the panels. These panels are beginning to fail, and it's visible that you can see the panels are beginning to bow outward, and the panels are failing and becoming a concern. If and when catastrophic failure were to occur, large pieces of masonry would fall from the building or could fall from the building, representing a substantial risk. In addition, we are still concerned about the parking structure. In addition to previous reports, we would note that there's been a significant amount of debris that has fallen from the ceilings to the parking structure floors, even after all the temporary shoring was installed and put into place. Which is still a concern. Also, we've noted previously, we believe an engineer or some other firm actually marked cracking conditions on the tops of column capitals. Column capitals are what prevents the slab from actually punching through or around these capitals, and we're seeing these cracks progress. We do believe that they were marked probably about 6 months ago or so ago, and cracking has since progressed beyond these marks, even with all the shoring in place. So those two items in our opinion, provide a significant concern for the safety of the building. Finally, we do know that the water intrusion infiltration is still continuing and progressing. We do have concerns overall about corrosion of structural steel elements, reinforcement in concrete, and those types of issues. Finally, we would like to add that some of these issues definitely were caused or related back to the original design of the building back in 1971. Buildings typically just aren't built.
Thank you, Tom. That concludes your available time.
Thank you.
The next registrant is Wally Borowski, Tomahawk Trail, Madison opposed, wishing to speak. Wally, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Chairwoman Zellers and members of the committee. I wish to speak in opposition to this demolition. I represent Paisans Restaurant, one of the co-owners of the restaurant. When we moved there in 2006, we invested in the restaurant and in the community. And I understand that the building does need to come down. I would like to see the building commission, planning commission delay this and allow our landlord to communicate with us and to resolve our lease and make good on the guarantees that they've made, and they've not done so. I think it'd be, my opinion is that, of course, obviously I've looked at the building. I wish we would have had forewarning that they weren't going to support their commitment to the building and to us and to the neighborhood. It's a shame, but I would like to see the planning commission be able to delay the demolition permit until after our landlord is able to resolve the commitments that they made to us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next registrant is Edward Kaharski, Sydney Street, in opposition, wishing to speak. Edward, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hello?
Yes?
Yes, thank you. I just, my problem with this proposed demolition action is just that it would represent the largest and most egregious example of demolition by neglect that's ever occurred in this city. And I really have a problem with that going forward without some true consequences for this negligent owner. And this previous speaker alluded to their the impact on their business and their, I consider them an institution in the city. And then, of course, all the other tenants are done without. And this did not have to happen. And I don't know how we assign accountability for that. But a building of this age as a concrete frame should not be at the end of its useful life. We have plenty of buildings this old and older with parking structures beneath them that are in perfectly good shape because they were maintained. And so it's a terrible precedent to allow this owner to benefit from this demolition by neglect. We usually see this, Liddell, in the Landmarks Commission, not so much in the Plan Commission, but this is a big one, and it's really unfortunate. And I respect the opinion of the first speaker about the condition of the building, but it's hard for me to believe that there isn't a repair option. We certainly haven't seen any quantified or engineered assessment of what would need to be done to stabilize the building. And I think that ought to be a minimum condition that the owner should be required to fulfill. So that's all I'm saying is, it's not a star building, but it's a plenty nice one, and it's served well. And, a 50-year-old building should not be coming down when it's constructed as a concrete frame. It just makes no sense. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Other registrants, Kirk Keller, Camelot Drive, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Representing Plunkett Reish Architects, Jordan Comp, East Erie Street, Milwaukee, neither support nor opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Representing Wilson Street Redevelopment. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Seeing Alder Paulson.
Yes. Is there anyone of the registrants who does represent the owner? The building? I wasn't clear on that.
I'm not sure unless it's Jordan Comp, Wilson Street Redevelopment. Is that the owner? Matt or Colin, could you clear? Matt?
None of the registrants that I'm aware of represent the current owner. The registrants represent the prospective owner, purchaser.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any further questions of any of our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is probably for Matt Tucker. A quick review of our ordinances tell me that demolition by neglect refers only to what I'll call historic properties, and that we don't have something called demolition by neglect, at least with respect to non-historic properties. Are there portions of the ordinance that do relate to something analogous to that we heard in public comment?
Sure. Yeah, I believe you're correct. And the answer is the ordinances that we have, like the ordinances that require you to maintain the structure, are the ordinances that the building was under order on, dating back to February of 2018. That went to municipal court recently for a trial, and the property owner was found guilty on those charges, and substantial fines were levied. But we still have this building in this condition as it sits today.
So I think you're saying that that's the extent of what can be done in terms of our ordinances.
That's correct. What we can do is prosecute and take days of violation and trial to our municipal judge, and the outcome is their decision.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Are there further questions? Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Chairperson Zellers, and good evening to the commissioners. I wanted to take the opportunity to ask our building inspection director if he would please, on the record, assure the community what the current condition of the building is in terms of the possibility of imminent collapse or other catastrophic occurrences at 131 West Wilson Street. Matt, as you know, I've received many concerned inquiries along these lines, particularly since this application and its letter of intent was made public, which makes all sorts of very extreme representations regarding the potential collapse of this building occurring in the near future, if not tonight, for example. So I'd really appreciate it if you could go into some detail as to what you and your professional opinion is the current condition of the building, reference possible catastrophe, so that I can frankly share this video link to this meeting with my constituents that continue to have these concerns moving forward.
Sure. Thank you, Alder Revere. I appreciate that opportunity. I really do. I think it's good to set the record straight on the building, at least what we know about the condition of the building. The structure, parking structure levels of the building were noted as in poor condition dating back to 2016 via a report that was commissioned by the owner at the time. In 2018, there was a greater concern issued by the same similar firm, a firm that actually had acquired the earlier firm, continuing to note significant degradation of the parking structure. That something needed to be done. Something was ultimately done at the city's behest, I would say, fairly late, 2021 in September. The owners started installing a temporary shoring measure system to shore up the potentially failing portions of the building. What this is if you've ever seen a concrete building being constructed, there are metal poles that run from the floor to the ceiling, and then a floor level is poured. Those poles are called shores, are then removed, and you just basically keep moving up levels. Those types of posts, there's about 3,200 of those that are within the parking structure. They're at a separation of about 5 feet. They're also placed one on top of the other through different levels. So the posts are sitting on each other, not just randomly through the structure. Their design is intended to transfer the load that was principally going to the columns down to the foundation. Now, I'm not an engineer. I described it generally. There's some people that could probably describe it with a lot more technical expertise than I have, but that's basically how the system has worked. The city, as a condition of opening the building in October of 2021, after we had closed it in September, required that those shores be inspected on effectively like a biweekly basis. They were inspected by the shoring company who was in direct contact with us. They stopped inspecting the shores when bills weren't paid. In December, we closed the building again. The bills got paid. They started inspecting again in, I think, middle January. Also, on a quarterly basis, the engineering company that designed the shore system has been going through and inspecting the system to see that it is working and tracking those. I would call them progressive cracks, or those known cracks that were identified by the first speaker. We were also in the building and saw those and could see them dated and marked, and just kind of trying to keep track of things. The assurances we got from the people who installed and were inspecting the shores and the firm that was checking the system was that the system was working, but the structure is degrading. They had indicated to us that about 20 or so shores had to be tightened. So that's 20 or so shores of 3,200 once again. So it's not as, there wasn't a significant shift or change. The system that those shores are designed to prevent is something that's called a progressive collapse. And that's where the building falls down kind of like a house of cards. It's designed to prevent that from occurring. It sounds like everything's working fine. The issue that we're looking at right now is just that they haven't been inspected, and we'd like to get that inspection to start again up until and through as the building is coming down. The matter of siding and the cladding of the building. The siding and cladding of the building was restored about 15 years ago, and you can see that there was tuck pointing and caulking and other types of measures that were put in because bowing and similar type of aging was occurring. There is obviously some degradation to that, and there's some maintenance that needs to be done. We have advised the building owner that if they wanted to fence off the property because they were afraid that brick was going to fall off the building, we had no concern with them doing that at all, but we didn't necessarily agree that we thought it was an issue. We have experience with brick falling off buildings. It often happens in like the springtime during thaws or during those significant temperature shifts when you also have water that's present, freezing and thawing. Not going to say that it's not going to happen because we don't know, and we know the building is in pretty rough shape, but we don't believe that it is a risk at this point in time to the public and to surrounding neighbors. However, we are very supportive of this demolition moving forward and this building being taken down.
Thank you very much,
Matt.
Matt. I appreciate that.
Do you have any follow-up, Alder Verveer?
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I'm going to move that the Planning Commission find that the demolition standards can be met and recommend that the Planning Commission approve the demolition of a commercial building at 131 West Wilson Street.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepard. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I'm sorry about the Paisan restaurant. I've gone there many times over the years, and it's a good place, and I hope they can relocate. But the commission can't resolve landlord or lease issues, and so we really can't go there. What we're reviewing is a demolition of the building. And I think it's unfortunate that the owner may have not maintained the building as properly as possible. And I think that's obviously that's a shame. But it appears that there are structural issues, and that that there may be hazards to the public, at least long term, so that this building has to come down, and I'm not going to stand in its way. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Are there further comments? Alder Verveer.
Thank you again, Chair Zellers. it's with a deep regret and sadness that I do support the motion before you. I cannot overstate how frustrating this situation is to me personally and to so many others that are much more directly impacted than I am. It is an absolute understatement to say that the building perhaps was not been properly maintained. I have absolutely no sympathy for the applicant. The applicant has disappointed me time and time and time again. I don't mean to make this personal, because it certainly isn't personal, but it has been so disappointing. And I can only say that I've been heartbroken so many times in conversations with the tenants of the building, employees of the building, the immediate neighbors of the building that are concerned that their lives might be in jeopardy. It is just untenable situation. My heart goes out to all those that have been so personally impacted. This really is a true tragedy, what's happened here. Yes, indeed, Pisons is a community institution that's been here for over 70 years in our community. And I certainly hope and have every expectation that they will be able to relocate once again and be prosperous in their new location, hopefully downtown. But I do implore the applicant, not that they've listened to me at all during this entire ordeal, to reach a fair and equitable settlement with the remaining tenant, which indeed is Pisons. All of the other tenants in the building, as I understand it, have had their tenants, have had their tenancies ended or will soon be ended, that have been either negotiated or the leases have run their due course. A tremendous exception is Pisons in terms of how many years they have left on their lease. It's not so much Ed and Wally, the owners, that I'm sad about. It's all the employees and their families that have been so adversely impacted by this. And yes, indeed, patrons like myself certainly have missed the possibility of enjoying our time at Pisons. But I cannot disagree with anything that is articulated in the staff report before all of you. The building obviously has outlived its useful life. It is shocking that a building that's only about 50 years old has been allowed to deteriorate to this condition. It's just unbelievable to me, and I think always will be unbelievable to me. How a building constructed in 1971 could be in such a severe condition that it has to come down, particularly a building of this substance. But the reality is that's where we are. It is what it is. I don't begrudge building inspection all of the times that in their professional estimation, they felt they were compelled to post the building no occupancy, on again, off again, over the last many months, going back to last year. As I referenced in my preamble to my question of our building inspection director, I want to also just say on the record here how disappointed I am in the tone of the letter of intent attached to this application. It unnecessarily alarmed adjacent residents. I have heard from many residents at 111 and 139 West Wilson Street that literally were worried whether or not they need to relocate. They have to move to a friend's house, a family member's home, find a hotel room when the news came out as to the allegations that are represented in the application before you tonight. Our professional building inspection staff, as you heard in Director Tucker's response, in no way, shape, or form believes that this building is at risk of imminent collapse. And yet that's what the application before you states. And it is a crying shame that I have had to talk to constituents that live in the shadows of this building, worried for their lives because of this application. Obviously, if the building was at any risk of imminent collapse, we would be closing Wilson Street, we'd be closing the rail corridor. That is not the case here. With that said, as I say, I agree with the conclusion of the staff report. Obviously, you have legal standards to review as it relates to demolition permit applications. And I think any reasonable person's plain reading of the standards are that they are clearly met and that a demolition permit should be granted this evening. And I certainly agree with that analysis and trust that you will do so moments from now in a unanimous fashion. I want to also just say that I do look forward to a future redevelopment of this site because of the unorthodox nature of where we are and the situation we find ourselves in. The neighborhood has not been able to begin in any way a comprehensive discussion of what the future redevelopment on this site might be. There have been some very initial conversations, but they've been rather unorthodox. So I do want to close on a somewhat positive note and say that I do look forward to working on the redevelopment of this site with other downtown stakeholders as we review plans as they move forward. And obviously, hopefully sooner rather than later, following the demolition of this building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder. Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Next, any business by members? Seeing no raised hands, secretary's report. Heather.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I'm going to do something I never do, and it's to begin with a visual. I want to share first the council action on the interrelated items at Oscar Mayer and just make sure that the Plan Commission has a good sense of what they did at their last meeting. So the council did act on the Plan Commission recommended alternate alignment of the future streets, which are shown here on the left. And so as we move forward, this will be the alignment for future streets. Again, rights of way have not been acquired by the city, but this is providing some good certainty for the city moving forward. One nuance I want to show on the right, the Plan Commission had recommended, if you'll recall, back in the spring, a split zoning of this property at 702 Ruskin. And the Plan Commission had recommended moving ahead with a rezoning to commercial corridor transitional here, but maintaining the back part of it, the northern part of it, as industrial rather than rezoning it to conservancy. And the council ended up making one small change to that in their final decision shown here. Instead of split zoning the property, they just made the decision to maintain that industrial zoning for the entire property. As staff, I think that was a fine action. And of course, in the future, if there is a redevelopment proposal on this site, the property owner could seek split zoning at some future date to accommodate a future development. Just wanted to show that rather than trying to describe it in narrative form. And then I'll move on to the other actions of the council. All others were pursuant to the recommended action by Plan Commission. And so they placed on file the downzoning on Mary Street. The council also approved McGrath's request to rezone property on Olin Avenue for the new 190-some unit building, 12-story building. And then finally, without any discussion, approved the Monona Drive and Cottage Grove Road rezoning for the new mixed-use building there. Now, when we look forward to our next few regular meetings, I'm just going to highlight a few items. On July 11th, we'll see together a proposal on the 400 block of State Street, right next to Lisa Link Peace Park. And the other one that I'd like to highlight on that agenda is 3401 East Washington Avenue. It's a rezoning and a conditional use for a significant multi-building residential complex at the old Gardner Baking site. This is right next to Hawthorne School on the northeast side of the city. And then a couple highlights on our July 25th meeting. We'll be looking at the addition of, the new planning framework that you've heard a lot about over the last many months and actually over a year. Now we've been working on that. That has been making its way successfully through several boards, committees, and commissions. And due to some summer delays, it's taking a little bit of a while to get back to you, to the Plan Commission, but we expect that on July 25th. And hope to move forward with our first new sub-area plan under that framework late this year. Secondly, on the 25th, we'll look at the incorporation of health and safety as another element to our city's performance excellence framework, and ultimately another element to the city's comprehensive plan. You may remember we have 6 elements now in our comprehensive plan, and health and safety is something that many agencies have been discussing since the comprehensive plan was adopted, and believe it really warrants inclusion as another element in the comprehensive plan. This is an initial action toward that end. And then just one other item, I believe, 402 West Wilson Street, an amended planned development zoning for a new 4-story, 54-unit building on that site. I think those are the highlights coming up, and I will stop it there for this evening. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Next on our agenda, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell, seconded by Commissioner Mendez. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, we are adjourned. I will see you on July 11th. Enjoy your summer. Take care.